Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's kj52. Welcome to the kj52 podcast episode. Who cares? Anyway, I'm here with the homie Rubox.
Whoa.
Scotty. How you say your last name? Posal. Really phenomenal. A phenomener. You're a phenomener. How long have you been a phenomenon? Somebody asked me last night who my favorite Muppet was. And I said, I like the two guys that just yell at everybody. Up in the balcony. They're like, I'm like, do those count as Muppets? Is it weird that I like the haters? Anyway, we're gonna be those two guys. I can't think of their names. It's like Edgar and somebody else.
Something like that.
They just heckle.
Yeah.
Then I was like, well, my close second one, it was the Swedish Chef. I've heard.
Morky. We put the mork in the schmork.
Was that the Swedish Chef?
Yeah.
No. And then I was like, I like Beaker too.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, totally not what we're going to talk about for this podcast, but maybe we just need to do a whole Muppet podcast. So Scotty, aka Rubox, is a really phenomenal. I won't even necessarily call you a beatboxer. I will call you a vocal percussionist, because I don't think you can be contained to just beatboxing. Because I've seen you in Southern gospel groups. Right? You've gone out with all a cappella Southern gospel groups, and you've provided just the percussion. And didn't you get paid to be a caroler?
Yes.
You were a professional caroler.
Yeah, so a lot of a cappella stuff, singing, and also beatboxing company.
Yeah, so we're actually driving to an event about an hour away. I just picked them up from the airport, so you'll hear a little navigation talk in the background. But we're heading to an event I'm doing with the Kansas state of Kansas. I think it's Department of Children and Families. I can't remember the exact name, but it's for orphan kids and kids who are wards of the state. And so we're going to do an event for them today, which I'm really excited to do. But I was like, you have a unique gift that you bring to the table with vocal percussion. You know, I've watched you just hold a crowd's attention with nothing more than a microphone and the power of. See, I just don't. I don't know if I. Okay, so here's something. I'm gonna ask you some questions about beatboxing, because I kind of consider beatboxing like, some people say it's the fifth element of hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking, DJing, MCing, graffiti art.
Yeah.
Some people have said beatboxing is the fifth element, but do you think? Because I can definitely, like, I've beatboxed my own beats to myself. Like, I'm always banging out like rhythms and tones, because I think as a rapper that's what you do.
Right.
But man, I just don't know if I got the lips. Do you think it's all in the lips? Do you got to have a certain type of lip structure to beatbox properly?
No, I mean,
You think anybody can learn?
you know, the thing.
And I don't mean just learn. I mean, like, do it on a good level.
Well, I think that the way that everyone is made is going to be different. Your facial structures, the way your nose tonality. So everyone has their own unique sound. I mean, as beatboxers, you know.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's good. That's like the you're all special. Here, everyone gets a trophy. That doesn't mean you're good. I know you're being nice because you're a good-hearted, kind person, but do you think you're either born... Like, I would assume everybody can keep a beat, but does that necessarily mean that anyone can be a dope beatboxer?
Well, I think that...
Are you either... Is it nature or nurture?
I think it is... it's just practice. And plus, it's passion.
Yeah.
If you're passionate and you want to learn how to do it, then you will strive to learn anything and everything about trying to attain a skill of whether it's hitting your snares and kicks harder, you know, doing triplet hi-hats, doing tritones, bitones, whatever. You know, it depends. I mean, if you have the passion to do it, you know, same thing like rapping. I mean,
yes, but just passion does not equal good. Okay, I know a lot of passionate people that would love to be in the NBA, and they're playing rec league till they till their knees give out. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, look, you can certainly work past your genetics, but wouldn't you agree that some of it you have to have some sort of degree of bent based on your picking your parents properly?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I believe, because I also DJ, so I have a lot of different genres of music in my head when I'm beatboxing. So it's not just, I'm thinking about hip hop, but I'm thinking about whether it's jazz, swing, pop, funk, or whatever. So I think there's a lot into it, because you can just listen to a lot of...
Right, well, drums are universal, obviously. Right. Percussion is universal, but we know that hip-hop is a very percussion-driven genre.
Right. And I think that, when anyone listens to music, usually it's what makes your head bob, and that would be the beat over the lyrics.
Right.
Then if the beat's catchy, then you're like, oh, okay, now let me see what the lyrics sound like.
Yeah.
So, I definitely think that what you listen to affects, what types of beats you do. It's kind of like how you do production.
Yeah. Well, okay, so give me an elevator pitch of beatboxing. You know what I say when I mean elevator pitch?
No.
Like if we were in an elevator and we're going down the elevator and I said, all right, man, by the time this elevator hits the bottom floor, I'm getting off. You got to pitch me on what you're about in that fast. That's the elevator pitch. So give me that elevator pitch for beatboxing.
First floor, second floor, drop.
See, that's what I'm talking about. You didn't even say anything, but you said everything.
Yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah. Was that what you meant by pitch, or you meant like talking, like sell you?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I did mean actually explain, but you actually explained better in that. And that's a good point, because it's one thing to talk about something, it's another thing to do something.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Definitely.
But let's break down the science of what you just did. So, obviously, at its most basic elements, it's a kick drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat,
yes.
right? So
Basics.
I've heard you talk about this in a few classes I brought you into, where you talk about how the letter forms the sound. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, so say that. This is a longer elevator pitch. Go.
Okay. All right. Well, consonants. It's all about consonants, because when you're doing a kick drum, it's usually a B, a b, 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 b. And then when you're doing snares, I usually use a K, 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 K. And doing a hat, you're using a T, 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 or TS. So, and if you're breaking that down, you can always take the bass, the and then you can also pitch it. Same with the snare. Or added some echoes. With the hi-hats is so you can mess with the dynamics. So once you do your basics, then you can start filling with the effects of it and the pitches of it. So that's like a basics and then some. Yeah.
It's great. Really, really. That's that. You know what? And that's so easy to think of, because like I've heard you say, people go, "Oh, teach me how to beatbox," and I've heard you just say, "Work on those letters, the B, the K, the T."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it makes sense, because that's those are the basics of it. But see, the funny thing is, so you can, in my humble opinion, it's like someone that can have, you can have a crappy drum kit, But you can still keep a good beat on a crappy drum kit. It's just the sonics and the sounds of it won't sound necessarily great. Right. So I meet people sometimes. Actually, this has happened to me on many occasions where I've had beatboxers. Would you say is that the right term? Should I say beatboxers or vocal percussionists?
Yeah, I mean,
is it that serious? Like breakdancers don't like to be called breakdancers.
They like to be called b-boys.
B-boys.
Well, the thing about, as far as the term, I mean, I talked with this guy who used to run Beatboxer Entertainment up in New York named Kid Lucky, and he gave me a breakdown that the main overall of everything is vocal percussionist, and then the hip hop section of vocal percussion is a beatboxer. And that's from Dougie Fresh and Buff.
Is he the first one to coin that term?
I'm not really sure who coined the term. I mean, if it was Dougie Fresh or if it was Buff from the Fat Boys, but I want to say that it's just emulating a drum machine or what they call back in the days a beatbox, a box that makes beats.
Right. Is it just even to pause there? I know we've digressed about 1,300 times on this conversation, but isn't it interesting to think that most of these things come from people that have nothing, and rather than just throwing up their hands and saying, we have nothing, we're not going to do it, they said, you know what, we can't be stopped, we're going to create our own thing. You know what I mean? We can't afford a drum machine, we'll make our own drum machine.
Yeah.
We can't afford instruments, we will string these break beats together and create our own instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The interesting thing about it is that, just the way that how styles of music comes from, and it doesn't start with anything extravagant. Who knows, maybe the next thing in hip-hop will be taking a cardboard, 2 wooden spoons, and a harmonica, and that may be the next biggest thing, and it's happening somewhere in Kansas or somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, you say cardboard, and I always thought, b-boys and cardboard, breakdancers and cardboard go synonymously together, right? At least the era that I remember b-boying, it's you brought your cardboard out, you threw it down, you started getting on it. And I never stopped the question to go, why is that? Why is cardboard so synonymous with b-boying? And then I heard some podcast or some interview with Crazy Legs, and he said the place where they used to practice was next to a furniture store. And they were always throwing the cardboard out the back of the furniture store. And it just happened to be because of convenience, they would grab the cardboard to make their own dance floor. You know what I'm saying? These things we just still go, we do it because that's what we do. It's no, it's just the easiest. Sometimes we just pick the easiest path to travel, so to speak. You know what I mean? But it does make sense. Again, it's we have no space to dance. We're going to create our own space. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's what... It's interesting for me, too, being at this point and doing hip-hop where it's paid my bills for darn near 20 years. It's a music of the youth. It's the last American music, you know what I mean? The last created American music art form, was created by kids, so to speak. For kids, and it still speaks to kids. So even me now being a grown man, it's maybe I've moved out of that phase, but I find it still interesting that it still captures their, it captures their heart,
Right.
Even though they don't have any connection to the history or to the origins, or they don't know that, or what in the world is that on the side of the road?
Looks like a living room in a can.
Built underground. Oh, it's an underground. They're building underground places to live. Sorry, this is not a video podcast. You don't know what we're talking about.
That could be the next startup of the next wave.
I think it's for people that think the bomb is going to drop. They're building these underground bunkers. You couldn't do that in Florida, could you?
No.
No. You'd be in the water table.
You would hit the water.
You would hit the water. It'd be our basement floods there is no basements. I always had a fear of basements. When I go to see my grandma's basement up in New Jersey, I would not go down there.
I remember the first time I went into a basement was in Cincinnati with my sister, And it was so weird because, in Florida, we're not used to having, like, things going underground.
Right, and I should pause and say you are born and raised Orlando?
Yes.
Orlandoian?
Yeah. I've been there since 78.
Nice. I find Orlando to be a very interesting town, too, because it's such a cross-section of so many different types of people for Florida. Even though Florida is very diverse, I feel like Orlando's even more diverse because it's a tourist attraction. Everybody comes there to eat overpriced turkey legs at Disney World and wait in lines. I never understood the point of paying money to wait in lines.
But people do it.
I know! I have so many people go, oh man, I can't wait to go to Disney. I'm like, for what?
To wait in line.
To wait in line. Disney even said that. He goes, my whole structure, the way Disney World will be set up, is that you will always be anticipating the next thing.
By waiting in line.
I'm like, it's 1,000 degrees outside and people are just sweating to death and they're like, wee! Anyway, back to what I was talking about. That was a lot of divergence.
Yeah.
I'll fix it in post.
Okay.
No, I won't. What drew you to beatboxing out of all the things that you've, because like I say for myself, the first thing, even as a kid, I was like 7 or 8, watching somebody breakdance, I was like, oh, I want to do that. Then I was like, oh, I want to be a DJ because a white DJ is a lot easier to be accepted. Then I was like, you know what? I'm going to give rap. No, I probably graffiti art too captured my heart. So, but I always tried like everything and landed on rapping. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why beatboxing? Why was that your thing?
Well, I mean, I grew up as a breakdancer when I would say 82, 83, and its popularity, I kept doing it as long as I can, even when it kind of died out. And there's a lot of guys who were with me in middle school who did it, and then once it kind of like fell from, was no longer popular, you either A, started to skateboard, B, became a surfer, or...
Is it so funny that Florida had a surf culture and no waves?
Yeah, yeah.
Dude's walking around with Ocean Pacific on. The biggest wave we're going to get is about a foot, unless a hurricane comes. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, and so others became DJs, and others took their shot at rapping. My thing, I don't know. I guess during that time, Fat Boys were big, and then Dougie Fresh came out, and then all of a sudden, there was a lot of groups that had beatboxers in them. And this is around mid to late 80s. And I just gravitated. I was just so interested in all these beatboxers and all the way the sounds were made. I was like, wow, that really sounds just like a drum. And so, I started writing some raps, corny little raps around that time. But I think the main thing was it kept falling through beatboxing, and it wasn't until it was around 89 I was watching Night at the Apollo, and I was watching some beatboxer, and he was amazing, and it got me more interested to and this is when beatboxing kind of died out in the mainstream. But I saw that and I was like, I got excited again. So I was like, you know what, I want to be like that guy and learn how to make, drum noises and rhythms with my mouth. So
you feel like the Roots brought that back a little bit when, mid to late 90s with Rozelle. Yeah. Do you feel like that kind of brought a second renaissance to it, maybe a little bit?
Oh yes, big time. I mean, that even made it more so, because I think after that Night of the Apollo, I don't know who the beatboxer was, but it wasn't until I heard this tape. Tim Westwood does this hip hop show, and they had Rozelle on it with I think it was RZA and someone else, and it just totally blew my mind, like him doing it live. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like taking it up another level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can definitely remember the era where I was really cutting my teeth, say, early to mid to late 90s. Like, when ciphering, which, you know, for those who don't know what ciphering is, where dudes would circle up, and it was very common, like, post-show, mid-show, after the show, if there was any group of rappers, they were going to circle up and rhyme. And usually you had to come off the head. You had to, you know, make it up on the spot. Dudes that came into the circle with a written usually got laughed out or kind of looked down upon. But definitely I remember that era, there was always somebody that got yanked in to do the beatbox. You know what I mean? I always kind of, at some point, we started to feel bad for him. Because at some point, it was like, whack rapper number 1, whack rapper number 2, whack rapper number 3, good rapper number 4, whack rapper number 5. What, you know what I mean? Like, and these guys are just stuck there. Because nobody was going to rhyme a cappella. You know what I mean? No one was going to, you didn't, you know, it just was not the thing. So, like, you had to have your one guy in your crew that could beatbox. So for me, fortunately, Golden Child could beatbox. So, like, that was always, like, a good thing. So if I always was, like, when he wanted to rhyme and I had to take over the beatbox, I was always a little bit like, okay, let's speed it up because I really don't feel comfortable. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't about timing. Like, I always had good timing. It was just I didn't have great sounds, you know, like, you'd feel the energy dip.
Right.
But, anyway, do you feel like that era was a sort of a golden age era for beatboxing?
Oh, like 90s?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the thing is that because there was that gap between 89, 90, which I really loved, but then it went into this whole weird shift, like where breakdancing died out, but then you had like the new school hip hop dancing, which is like the Running Man and
right, which I would say I participated heavily in that era. Proud to say, thank you. But anyway,
right. So you had that, but then you still had breakdancers who were still killing it, who refused to stop, kept doing it until the next wave in the 90s came, and when people it got its popularity back, but on an underground wave, and these guys who were still breakdancing were like, oh, we never quit. You know, and I think that's the same thing with DJing in the 90s. Like, how that was such a golden time because the era of scratching and having DJs went all the way up, but then it kind of stopped. But then, like, you would see groups like Invisible Scratch Pickles and
right. The era of the battle DJ became a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as like pretty much throughout the whole 90s, like the era of competition seemed like at its highest level. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'll never forget, like, watching some early 90s video and they had a breakdancer in it, and I just was hating, like, why is this old school breakdancer in this freaking video? Like, nobody breakdances anymore. And I never forget somebody goes, yeah, they do. I'm like, no, they don't. All the breakdancers I know are gone. They're like, not on the West Coast. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh. They're like, yep, it's still around. And it's funny how everything does evolutionize into something else, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, flash forward. This is some old man get off my porch talk. But flashing forward, I noticed right around the era when dubstep was super popular, this new resurgence of kids that wanted to do dubstep beatboxing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like, these, and I don't mean this derogatory, but these suburban white kids were like, yo, man, let me beatbox for you. I'm like, I'm like, okay, is that all you can do? Like, and I got a little, on one hand, I'm like, oh, it's cool that it's coming back and being reappreciated, but on the other hand, I'm like, you can't just sound like robots fighting each other.
Right.
But, bring this all to a finality. Here's the one thing I had to say. So right around that era, inevitably, you know, and I think I probably became known as like the guy that would freestyle at his shows, way past when people were doing that anymore. You know, I kept that going to where it was like, where freestyling for me was like, it was a skill set that every MC had to have. Sooner or later it died out and I just kept going with it, and all of a sudden I realized, like, I'm the last man standing out here. Like, nobody does this anymore, So now I'm in a new era with a new group of kids that have not come up with it, that all of a sudden it's like, I've got like a new, this stands out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I might freestyle at my show for this little thing or that little thing, and then inevitably somebody always came up to me at the end of the show and they would say, yo man, would you freestyle to my beatbox? And I was so cringy when I heard that, because usually it was not good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, these kids would be so excited to have me freestyle to their beatbox, and maybe they had some of the sounds down,
right.
but their timing was so bad. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they could not keep a beat. And everything about what I do is about timing.
Right.
That's why if anybody used to ask me, they'd be like, oh man, freestyle for me. I'm like, I don't freestyle a cappella. I need a beat. Like,
right.
So I'd either pull a beat up on my phone, or I'd make them clap or snap their fingers or something. And I used to be like, I don't know, it used to irritate me, because I'm like, I get it, you're a kid, you're excited, you want to learn something new and you're excited about it. Dude, you gotta like at least have the basics. Like, you gotta be able to keep time.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the thing I started noticing, was it wasn't really about being a percussionist. It was just about showing out.
Right.
And that's inevitably the guys that just wanted themselves to be the focus. They were never that good.
Right.
It was the quiet ones, like you, who I never even knew did anything, that never walked in like, I'm the man! That always had the best timing. They knew how to they knew how to be like, I gotta play the back. It's not about me.
Right.
Unless it is the time where it is about me, but...
Right.
Did you find the same thing around that same time?
Well, the thing about, like, what I was doing, like, when I started getting more heavily into beatboxing, and I think it was because I was in a group called Andromeda, and we had a scratch DJ, and then we had an MC, and we had some breakdancers too. But when they asked me to, the DJ, his name was SPS. He now DJs for his group called Black Violin, but he was a competitive scratch DJ, and he asked me to he wanted to introduce me to this guy who MCs, and I showed up at his apartment, and he wanted to hear me beatbox. I beatboxed, and then he decided to rhyme, and he really liked me, and he was like, hey man, I would love for you to do like a beatbox like showcase. I want to showcase you. And I remember I was kind of like nervous, but then I was kind of like, okay, well, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this because since I listened to a lot of mixtapes, I was kind of like, I'm gonna format my whole beatboxing around like a mixtape. So it's gonna have these different songs, and they're all gonna interweave with each other, and everyone's gonna recognize them, and it's you get your classics. But then, like, after the group broke up, then DJ, he was like, well, I'm going to continue battling. You should continue to do what you do. So I started hitting up open mics. And I would go and hit up open mics, and I was like, I wonder what it would be like to do this with a group that is a non-hip-hop group, like a non-hip-hop audience, and I can get the same reaction. So I would do stuff, and I would probably do 10 minutes of just straight beatboxing, just freestyling, and then I would notice like there were other musicians, singer-songwriter, guitar players, because usually when you go to open mics it's just like acoustic guitar stuff. So they would say, oh, this is a song I did, and then they would do that for 2 minutes, and then they would do other stuff, and I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just broke down my 10 minutes into like 3-minute segments and just label my routines and just make something, but kind of fit them to what the title would be. So I would start doing like these routines, and the when I would get a big response from a certain routine, I would formulate those best parts of those routines and put those into a super routine. And then when I did that, I would also get like other musicians who would watch me like, yo, I would love to jam with you. So I'm like, okay, sure. So I would end up jamming with, and this became like other like acoustic guitars, and then all of a sudden like I started being thrown into like some jazz groups, and then some rock groups, and then a tap dancer, and then a poet, and then a rapper, and then all these, and then I would observe other musicians and watch and seeing how bands work and seeing how just learn the science of your part as a rhythm section, as a drummer, and then I would learn that when you're getting in the mix when you're accompanying other people, you kind of take the back and you have to just let them do their thing, and you just keep the rhythm and you do it to the best ability. You don't solo or do anything, nothing to show off until they give you your time to do that.
Have you seen that video where it's the church drummer?
Yeah.
And they're playing, I forget what the song is.
Twirling his sticks and stuff.
No, it's not just that one, but it's the one where it's the church drummer, and they're playing some slow worship song, and he's just hitting like 1,000 drum fills, and he's playing like triple time.
Oh yes, I did see that.
And it's like God wonders beyond our galaxy, and no one is paying attention. Like no one is like, well, Tommy's at it again. Everyone's like, no, this is normal, and that brings it's what he does. But the best thing was like on an electronic drum kit. Anyway, that when you say about learning how to play your role, that's the first thing I thought of.
Right.
It was like the drummer that feels like he has to do 700 drum fills and 300 crashes and stand-ups and points the stick at the crowd. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, I would learn how to, I would observe drummers, a lot of drummers. I would, whether it's a rock drummer like Neil Peart of Rush or Ringo Starr of the Beatles, or some jazz drummers, but just observing and listening how they play, learning different fills, and then learning how to just be an accompaniment. Yeah. And that's like learning to be on the one all the time, and then also like, and then when it's your time to like, as I'm doing this, I'm also learning how to just being a solo beatbox or vocal percussionist, where I can do different genres and be more showcasey. Yeah. But until that point, that's when like I would start doing. We had this thing called the Ozone Cipher. This is around 2005, where they would, a whole bunch of MCs would meet downtown Orlando. And meet me and this other kid, Chaz, who'd be the beatboxers, and then we would go for like 2 hours straight, and I would learn how to just not go full force during the whole entire thing, because you're just gonna get burned out.
So I have a question. So you've kind of maneuvered in a lot of different worlds, obviously.
Yeah.
Church world, mainstream hip hop world. Uh-huh. Southern gospel world, caroling world.
Yeah.
And I know you've done the Austin's Coffee House for years, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen some really phenomenal freestyle guys come through.
Yes.
That you provided beats for. Can you name a couple incidents or guys that you were like, yo, these guys are good, but this guy was on like some genius level? Who have you, like, I mean, because I could see you, obviously you would get, at some point you got to get, not jaded, but get used to a certain level of output. Like, who have you been, like, blown away with?
As far as freestyle?
As far as freestyle MCs, like guys that you were rocking with, providing beats for.
Okay. I would definitely say, like Isaac and Jordan of Free Daps, those guys.
Yeah, for those that don't know who he's talking about, Isaac and Jordan were two of the guys that were a part of our Guinness World Record attempt, and when we set that, by the way, which rubox provided a lot of beats for, they went. I saw them go on from that to really monopolizing this world of like street art, street freestyle improv, but as a legit job, because they got employed by Disney, and then they got employed by Universal, and then they got to the point where they were just employing other people because they had such a demand, right?
Right.
But they've also operated in the battle world, the mainstream, you know. What's the battle league out of Orlando?
Oh, that's
Grind Time.
Yes.
Yes.
Grind Time.
So okay, continue. So I'm just giving people context so they know who. So and these guys are both believers too.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue.
This other guy named Matt Ills, who was the founder of Grind Time. Let me see. This guy named Dumbfounded. He lives on the West Coast, because I met him through. I did a talent showcase. It was like this Korean talent showcase in Atlanta, and they also did it over in California. And they asked me to perform at the Ford Amphitheater, and that's when I met Dumbfounded. He's this phenomenal Korean MC freestyler. I was thoroughly impressed with him. And then let me see who else.
Just out of curiosity, what made those guys so great? Like, what about them that was like really impressive?
It was just their way of freestyling, of talking about things that were around them, and you can tell that, you know, and they would inject a lot of, you know, it's either puns or a lot of, it's like not symbolism.
Yeah, simile, like or as.
Similes. Yeah. That, and then their cadences were just like really on point. And they had a playful thing about them. Like, it was very second nature to them. And it was just, because usually, like when I'm beatboxing, I'm just focusing on how I'm beatboxing and switching up beats. But when I find that one MC who is like I'm focusing on my beats, but then I hear the crowd, and I'm like, wait a minute, okay, so I'm listening to what they're actually doing, and then I can play around my beats to what they're doing and accent like their punchlines or their lines that they're putting out. Because I think it's one thing for, you know, to be a beatboxer, but it's another thing to really listen to what the MC is saying or what the you know, musician.
That's like a great drummer and a great lead singer.
Yes.
But in the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just that spontaneous creation.
Yeah.
Creativity, you know.
Yeah.
On another random side note, I can't even remember how this came up in conversation. I think because I said I was filming at Annie's in Cincinnati.
Oh my gosh! What?
Did I tell you about this?
No.
Well, I went there to Scribble Jam in 2002
What?
and lost. I never
Okay.
told you this story?
No.
I thought we talked about this.
I didn't know you got into Scribble Jam.
I was the first Christian hip-hop MC to battle at Scribble Jam.
Okay.
In 2002, I think, and I lost in the first round.
Okay.
So I was there like a couple months ago to talk at the same spot to kind of talk about how, you know, even in your losses can be a win,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all in what you do with it, da-da-da-da-da. I feel like you and I talked about this, and you said you were there at the infamous 97 Scribble Jam
Yes.
that Eminem lost to Juice.
Yes.
So for those that don't know what that is, that was a very infamous battle that Eminem had not been signed to Dre yet, but was just about to be in a couple months. And at the time, Juice was like, and still in my humble opinion, is the preeminent off-the-top freestyle MC. But back then he was, I think,
Right.
at least it seemed like he was, or at least on the come-up.
Yeah.
And they battled all the way to the last round. And you told me there was barely anybody there, right?
Oh no! Wait, there was a lot of people.
Oh, there was a lot of people there in '97.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was just. I remember when it got to the finals, and people were just like so like hyped because like they were just overtopping each other, and I think out of you only get like, I guess it's the best out of 3, but then like they would get the audience, the audience as a judge, whoever had the most crowd response.
Oh, so the win was on audience applause.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
and then I think it was part judge and part audience.
Part judge, okay, because that's how it was. No, when I did it, it was just judge. There was no audience.
Okay.
Maybe they changed that over the years, but
yeah, but I think when when they did the audience thing, like everyone would say, rematch, and then they would do another round, and then they would say, who do you think won? Everyone's like rematch. And I think they went like 5 or 6 rounds
for Juice and Eminem, or just period. That was just what was happening.
I guess for both.
Really?
Like, and then finally, they picked Juice.
Well, it's funny, if you watch that footage, which I've watched it a couple times, you can kind of see that M has a couple, he has a lot of go-to punchlines.
Uh-huh.
And then you could tell when he goes into freestyling, because he can't be as like multi-syllable, super intricate. And you can kind of tell where Juice was just like all freestyle. I'm sure he had some go-to punchlines, but he was so fluidic with it, and he's so laid back, that you saw that he never ran out of gas. You know what I mean? Where you could see, when I watched the video, you can kind of see where M's starting to, he's getting tripped up on himself a little bit. Like he tries to do a punchline based on Juice's name, and it kind of fell flat. And then I felt like, Juice is like the killer, finish him, death blow, where he goes, why do you call yourself Eminem? Like there's 2 of you, or like there's more than one. No, he goes, why you call yourself Eminem? Like there's more than one of you. I ain't scared of none of you. I'm not even quoting it properly, but it was just like perfect.
Right.
It was that moment where you could just tell, like but it was 2 guys really definitely at the top of their game. But
I think the thing with Juice is that his stuff was just so on point that everyone says, oh, it was written. But he was like freestyling, but that was the thing. It was like a lot of people could not believe that you could freestyle so well that it was, they were like, oh, they have to be written.
Right. Because inevitably 99.9% of all freestylers are going to use their clutch phrase, or they're going to trip over something, or, and that's just what happens when you're like formulating it in the moment. You know what I mean? It's just inevitable. Something is going to fall flat, or it's just not going to be as fluidic. And that's the thing about Juice, is you just never saw that. Like you never saw a moment where he, I'm assuming, and I would have to assume that he had go-to punchlines, but it was so effortless in his shifting of his brain, that you never saw, and the biggest thing I think that, and this is where I got to give Jordan and Isaac props, is to freestyle multi-syllable is infinitely harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I see the word here, it says food exit. Well, I cruise blessed it on a food exit. You're with your grooves necklace on my cruise checklist or something like that. Like none of that makes sense, but it technically kind of rhymes. But to be able to rhyme like that and make it make sense, like that's just a whole nother.
Oh yeah.
Where because most freestylers are like, I saw the cat, and then he grabbed a bat. He sat on a mat, and I was that. Do. You know what I mean? Because it requires less brain capacity. But I feel like the younger, like guys like Isaac and Jordan, I felt like they were Eminem. They came up under an Eminem era where you were, especially white kids, were definitely pushed to be multi-syllable.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they came up learning how to freestyle multi-syllable. And it pushed me to like go, I gotta push it up, I gotta step it up a little bit. But
Well, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
On a
You're interviewing me now.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
On a freestyle topic of like, what's the point of trying to get words that rhyme to the next level of, you know, making them make sense in a freestyle? Like, when you did it, how long did it take you to get to that? Because I'm sure you hit a peak when you're like, okay, I can rhyme any words, but you know, sometimes they don't make sense.
Right.
But when you get to that level, like, how long did it take you?
You know, it's weird. I can remember, even before I was a Christian, this makes no sense, but I can remember right when I just got enraptured by hip hop, like, I was fascinated by freestyling, because I used to watch Yo MTV Raps, and there would always be a section where someone would come off the head on Yo MTV Raps, and I'm like, yo, how do they do that, right? And so it made me go, like, I want to be able to do that. And I never could really get good or even coherent at it. And I'll never forget, like, randomly one summer up in Michigan, and I used to work as a bottle boy, and I would have to stack all the liquor inside the freezer, and I'd just be in there freezing. And for some reason, I don't know why I did this, I started freestyling about God. I don't know why I would do that, because it made no sense. And for some reason, the words started coming together. Nothing like prolific or long, but I just remember thinking, that's weird. Why would that happen? Like, God's not even on my mind. Like, you know. Flash forward a couple years later when I get saved, I'm not even really messing with it. But, you know, any kid like that mess around with rap will mess around freestyling. It wasn't until I got with Golden Child where he was like a kid, like he was 13, and I would have been 20 maybe, or 19, and he could come off the head like legitimately at 13, 14 years old. And I thought, well, crap, I'm not gonna let this 13-year-old kid like one up me. I'm supposed to be the one with all of it together.
Right.
So that actually was how we used to bond. Like, I would pick him up, we would put on beats, and then it just sort of became this sort of like healthy competition.
Right.
Then it turned into, you know, a year or two later, we're a group. We would just, like, at our shows, we would just put beats on. That was our show. We'd have a hook, but we were making up the songs on the spot.
Wow.
Live.
Nice.
Now, I don't think they were anything great, but it was enough that we had a give and take, that were like, if I was starting to like run out, he would jump in, and if he was starting to run up, I would jump in. So I think that's where maybe I started to be able to at least like it. I think most of it was just confidence. Like, I don't know if there was any moment. I think what happened just over time is confidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be like, when I first started running, I could only run a mile.
Right.
3 years later, I can run 2 miles. 4 years later, I can run 5 miles. 10 years later, I can run 20 miles. You know, at some point, you reach a point where it's like, I can run more than I need to actually run. And that's when you're like, now it's just fun. Now I can work on how I run, speed at which I run.
Right.
And I realized that I'm not the same kind of runner that he is, and I should stop trying to be that kind of runner. That was the other thing, too, for me. Like, I became to the point where I was like, you know what? I would watch guys that were more lyrical in their freestyles, or they were more compound words,
Right.
but they always lost the crowd. And that's when I'm like, you know what? You are too good for the people that are listening. And that's when I said, I'm not going to try to be at that level, because that level is not effective for what I do.
Right.
That's when I started simplifying everything, and I realized, like, in a way I dumbed down, you know, but I'm way more effective now. Once I started doing that I feel like is when I started to really find my own. So I don't consider myself the most prolific freestyler or like the top 10 or any of that.
Right.
But you put me in my element, and it's another tool in my tool belt. And that's all I ever looked at it as, you know. Whereas before I was like, no, I got to be the best. I got to be this, and this. And that's when I watched guys like Juice and Supernatural when they battled. I felt Juice was a better freestyler, but Supernat won the battle.
Right.
Because he played to the crowd. And I said, that's the two schools of freestyling. You you know?
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to pick the one that plays to the crowd because at my nature, that's where my default setting is.
Right.
I like goats.
Oh my gosh.
It's baby goats along the side of the road. Bah.
Yeah,
So anyway,
I think
it's like the drummer that's like the drummer's drummer versus like the guy that just keeps a beat.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's like Ringo Starr.
Yeah.
It's like he wasn't the best drummer, but he was the best drummer for the Beatles.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I was always like, my default setting is always the people. Like, I think, and that was more than even just my freestyling. That was just my music. Like, once I got to the point where I said, I want to make music for the average person. Once that became my target thing, I built everything around it. So, and you know, and you lose something when you do that. You lose some critical acclaim but I was like, critics don't pay the bills. People pay the bills.
It's true.
Anyway, good place to end. Great talk. Where can they check you out if they want to hear more of your stuff?
rubox Cube. If you have Facebook. And
Is it Cube? C-U-B-E-D?
C-U-B-E.
Okay, Rubox Cube. R-U-B-O-X-C-U-B-E.
Right.
.com?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh wait, that's on Facebook. Rubox Music. That's where my blog is. And I haven't blogged in a while, but I'm gonna start posting some stuff.
Stop lying. If you ever want to make him your friend, bring him a plate of mangoes. I found out like that was like his.
Yes.
That's like his Scooby snack treat.
ruboxmusic.com. If you have Instagram, Rubox Music. Yeah.
Word. All right, well, we are almost there. All right, y'all. kj52 Podcast. God bless y'all.
Peace.
Later.